The scream that tore from Eleanor Russell's throat when her father's hand struck her cheek echoed through their modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Hays City, Kansas. But no one came to help her, because everyone knew that defying Marcus Thornton was a death sentence in the spring of 1878. Blood trickled from her split lip as she stumbled backward, her emerald eyes blazing with a fury that matched the setting sun bleeding across the prairie horizon outside the window. Her father stood over her, his weathered face twisted with rage and shame, while her mother sobbed quietly in the corner, wringing her apron between trembling fingers. "You will marry him, Eleanor," her father said, his voice cold and final. "Marcus Thornton has offered good money for your hand, and this family needs it. We are drowning in debt, girl. Do you understand? We will lose everything." Eleanor wiped the blood from her mouth with the back of her hand, her entire body shaking with anger and fear. "I will not marry a man who beats women, father. I have seen what he did to Sarah Connolly before she died. Everyone in town knows he killed her, even if the sheriff looked the other way because of his money and influence." Her father's face darkened further. "You speak lies and gossip. Sarah Connolly died of fever. She died of broken ribs and internal bleeding," Eleanor shot back, her voice rising. "Dr. Patterson told me himself when I helped him tend to her in those final days. She was covered in bruises, father. Her jaw was broken, and you want to sell me to that monster." The second blow came faster than the first, knocking Eleanor to the floor. She tasted copper and felt the world spin around her. Through her blurred vision, she saw her mother take a step forward, then stop, caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her daughter. "Get out," her father said quietly, his voice more terrifying in its calmness than it had been in rage. "If you will not do your duty to this family, then you are no daughter of mine. Get out of my house." Eleanor pushed herself up on trembling arms, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her face. "Father, please," I said, "get out," he roared, and this time her mother did not even flinch. "You have until sunrise to leave Hays City. If Marcus Thornton sees you after that, I will not protect you from whatever he chooses to do, and neither will anyone else in this town." The night air was cold against Eleanor's bruised face as she stumbled out of the farmhouse with nothing but the dress on her back and a small cloth bundle containing a few possessions she had managed to grab. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, dark and foreboding under the emerging stars. She had nowhere to go, no family to turn to, and less than 12 hours before Marcus Thornton would learn of her refusal and come looking for her. She walked toward town, her mind racing. She had $17 saved from selling her needlework at the general store, hidden in the toe of her boot. It was not much, but it might buy her passage on a stagecoach heading east, away from Kansas, and the nightmare her life had become. The problem was that the next stage would not leave until tomorrow afternoon, well past her father's deadline. Hays City was quiet when she reached the main street, most businesses closed for the night. The saloon glowed with lamplight and echoed with rough laughter and piano music. Eleanor hurried past it, keeping her head down and her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She made her way to the small boarding house run by Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come west with the railroad workers and stayed after her husband died. Mrs. Chen was kind, and Eleanor hoped she might offer shelter for the night. But when Eleanor knocked on the door, Mrs. Chen opened it only a crack, her wrinkled face filled with sorrow. "I am sorry, Miss Russell. Word has already spread. Your father sent his farmhand to tell everyone in town that you are cast out and no one is to help you. Marcus Thornton has offered $50 to anyone who tells him where you are. I have grandchildren to think of. I cannot risk his anger." The door closed softly, and Eleanor stood alone on the wooden sidewalk, fighting back tears. She tried 2 more houses, people she had known her entire life, but received the same response. Fear of Marcus Thornton ran deeper than friendship or compassion. He owned the largest ranch in the territory, controlled the cattle shipments, and had the sheriff in his pocket. Crossing him meant losing your livelihood or worse. Eleanor found herself walking toward the edge of town, past the last buildings and into the darkness beyond. She could not stay in Hayes City, and she could not wait for the stage. She would have to walk, though she had no clear destination and little chance of survival on the open prairie alone. Wolves, harsh weather, and lack of water would kill her long before she reached another settlement. She was so lost in her desperate thoughts that she did not notice the figure standing in the shadows beside the livery stable until he spoke. "Running away in the middle of the night is a good way to get yourself killed, miss." Eleanor gasped and spun around, her heart hammering. A tall man stepped into the moonlight, and she recognized him as one of the drifters who sometimes worked odd jobs around town. She had seen him a few times over the past month, always quiet and keeping to himself. He was probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that seemed to catch the starlight. He wore typical cowboy attire, worn denim pants, a faded shirt, a leather vest, and a hat pushed back on his head. "I have no choice," Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have to leave." The cowboy studied her face, and she knew he could see the bruises forming, the split lip, the desperate fear in her eyes. "This about Marcus Thornton," Eleanor stiffened. "How did you know?" "Word travels fast in a small town. I was in the saloon earlier when your father's man came through, spreading the news and Thornton's offer." He paused, his expression unreadable. Refusing Thornton was the bravest thing anyone has done in this town in a long time. The words surprised her so much that she almost forgot her fear. "Most people think I am a fool. Most people are cowards." He said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. "My name is Vincent Sawyer. I have been working at the livery, saving up money to buy my own horse and head further west. I have about enough now." "I am Eleanor Russell, but I suppose you already knew that." Vincent nodded. "I did. Listen, Miss Russell, you will not survive a night out there on foot. The temperature drops hard this time of year and there are wild animals. If you are set on leaving, you need a horse and supplies." "I have $17, Eleanor said quietly. "Is that enough?" "Not for a horse and gear, no, but I might have a solution if you are willing to trust a stranger." Vincent glanced back at the livery stable, then at Eleanor. "I was planning to leave tonight anyway. Too many men asking questions about where I came from, and I prefer to avoid that kind of attention. I have 2 horses saddled and ready in there, provisions for a week's journey. You could ride with me, at least until we reach the next town. From there, you could take a train east or wherever you want to go." Eleanor hesitated, every warning her mother had ever given her about strange men echoing in her mind. But what choice did she have? Stay and marry Marcus Thornton, a man who would certainly beat her and probably kill her. Die alone on the prairie. Trust this stranger who had just called her brave when everyone else called her foolish. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Let us just say I know what it is like to be forced into something you do not want. And I know what men like Marcus Thornton are capable of." He met her eyes directly. "I give you my word I will not harm you or take advantage of you. You can keep your money, and we will travel separately once we reach the next settlement. But we need to leave now, before anyone notices." Eleanor made her decision. "All right, thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Vincent is fine." He turned and headed into the stable, moving quietly and efficiently. Eleanor followed, her heart still racing but feeling the first small spark of hope since her father had struck her. Inside the stable, 2 horses were indeed ready, both strong-looking animals with bedrolls and saddlebags attached. Vincent helped Eleanor mount the smaller of the 2, a dark mare with intelligent eyes. He swung onto his own horse, a tall bay gelding, and they rode out of Hayes City heading west under the cover of darkness. They traveled in silence for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and the town. The prairie opened up around them, vast and empty under the stars. Eleanor had never been more than a few miles from Hayes City in her entire 21 years, and the enormity of what she was doing began to sink in. She had nothing, knew nothing about survival out here, and was trusting her life to a man she had just met. But she was free of Marcus Thornton, and that thought steadied her. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon behind them, Vincent finally slowed his horse and glanced back at Eleanor. "There is a creek about a mile ahead. We will stop there to rest the horses and eat something. How are you holding up?" "I am all right," Eleanor said, though her legs already ached from the unaccustomed riding. "Where are we going exactly?" "There is a town called Sheridan about 3 days west of here. It is bigger than Hayes City, has a train station, and is far enough that Thornton's influence will not reach. You should be safe there." Vincent paused. "After that, I am heading into Colorado. There is ranch work there, and I heard they are always looking for good hands." They reached the creek as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Vincent helped Eleanor dismount, and she winced as her stiff legs took her weight. He pretended not to notice, busying himself with the horses while Eleanor walked to the water's edge and knelt to splash the cold water on her bruised face. Vincent built a small fire and produced coffee and hardtack from his saddlebags. It was not much, but Eleanor was hungry enough that it tasted wonderful. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the early morning chills slowly giving way to warmth as the sun rose higher. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said after a while. Vincent looked up from his coffee. "Go ahead." "You said you know what it is like to be forced into something. What did you mean?" His expression darkened, and for a moment Eleanor thought he would not answer. Then he sighed and stared into the fire. "I grew up on a ranch in Texas. My father was a hard man, believed in keeping control through fear and violence. When I was 16, he arranged for me to marry the daughter of a neighboring rancher to join the properties. I did not love her, and she did not love me, but my father did not care about that. He said I would marry her, and that was final." "What did you do?" Eleanor asked softly. "I refused. My father beat me worse than he ever had before, then locked me in the barn for 3 days without food or water. When he let me out, he told me I had one more chance to obey. I looked him in the eye and refused again." Vincent's voice was steady, but Eleanor could hear the old pain beneath it. "He pulled his gun and told me to leave and never come back, that I was no son of his. I was 17 years old, had nothing but the clothes on my back, and I have been drifting ever since. That was 8 years ago." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I am so sorry. Do not be. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. I learned to work cattle, became a decent hand, saw parts of the country I never would have seen otherwise. I am free, Miss Russell. Poor and rootless, but free. That is worth more than all the land and money in Texas." They sat in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire and the morning birdsong the only sounds. Eleanor felt a connection forming with this quiet cowboy, an understanding born of shared experience. They had both chosen freedom over comfort, dignity over obedience, and both had paid a heavy price for it. "Thank you for telling me that," Eleanor said finally. "And please call me Eleanor." Vincent smiled slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him. "All right, Eleanor." They traveled through the morning, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and stretch their legs. Vincent proved to be a considerate traveling companion, never pushing her too hard and always checking to make sure she was managing all right. He taught her things as they rode, pointing out landmarks, showing her how to read the sun and stars for direction, explaining which plants were safe to eat and which to avoid. "If you are going to travel alone after Sheridan, you need to know these things," he explained when she asked why he was teaching her. "The West can be beautiful, but it is unforgiving to those who do not respect it." By midday, the temperature had risen considerably, and Eleanor removed her shawl, tying it around her waist. She caught Vincent glancing at her a few times, his expression thoughtful, but he said nothing. They stopped for a brief lunch of dried beef and bread, sitting in the shade of a lone cottonwood tree beside a small stream. "Can I ask you something now?" Vincent said as they prepared to mount up again. "Of course. What will you do once you reach Sheridan? Do you have family elsewhere?" Eleanor shook her head. "No. My mother was an only child, and my father's family disowned him years ago when he married beneath his station, as they put it. I suppose I will find work, maybe as a seamstress or a cook. I am good with a needle and I can read and write." "Those are valuable skills," Vincent said. "You should be able to find something." That night they made camp in a small hollow protected from the wind. Vincent showed Eleanor how to build a proper fire and arrange the bedrolls for maximum warmth. He gave her the better blanket and positioned himself between her and the open prairie, a protective gesture that did not go unnoticed. As the stars emerged overhead, Eleanor lay in her bedroll and watched the fire dance. She should have been terrified, alone in the wilderness with a stranger, cast out from everything she had ever known. But instead, she felt oddly peaceful. For the first time in months, she did not have to fear Marcus Thornton's visits to her father's house. The way his eyes followed her, the crude comments he made that her father pretended not to hear. She did not have to smile and pretend while her future was bargained away like a piece of livestock. "Vincent," she said quietly into the darkness. "Yes." His voice came from the other side of the fire. "Do you ever regret leaving? Do you miss having a home?" There was a long pause. "Sometimes. Mostly I miss the idea of home more than the reality of what mine was. I think about having land someday, a place that is truly mine where no one can tell me what to do or who to be. But I do not regret leaving. Some things are worth more than comfort and security." "Like what?" "Like being able to look at yourself in the mirror and respect who you see looking back." Eleanor smiled in the darkness. "Yes, exactly like that." The second day of travel passed similarly to the first, with long hours of riding broken up by rest stops and brief conversations. Eleanor found herself growing more comfortable in the saddle and more comfortable with Vincent. He was not a talkative man, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and genuine. He seemed to notice everything around them, constantly alert to potential dangers but never making her feel afraid. That afternoon, they encountered their first real problem. As they crested a low rise, Vincent suddenly held up his hand for Eleanor to stop. Ahead of them, perhaps a half-mile distant, a group of riders was visible against the horizon. "Could be nothing," Vincent said quietly, "but we should be careful. Stay close to me." They continued forward at a slower pace, and as they drew nearer, Eleanor felt her heart sink. There were 5 riders, and even at a distance, she could make out their rough appearance and the way they sat their horses with the casual arrogance of men who feared nothing. The riders spotted them and changed direction, clearly intending to intercept them. Vincent's hand moved to rest on the gun at his hip, and Eleanor saw his jaw tighten. "Let me do the talking," he said quietly. "No matter what they say, stay calm and stay mounted." The riders approached with whoops and hollers, circling around them. They were exactly what Eleanor had feared. Rough men with hard eyes and sneering mouths, the kind who saw lone travelers as easy prey. The leader, a man with a scar running down his cheek and missing several teeth, pulled his horse directly in front of Vincent's. Well, what have we got here? A cowboy and his pretty lady out for a ride. The man's eyes raked over Eleanor in a way that made her skin crawl. Just passing through, Vincent said evenly. We do not want any trouble. Oh, we are not trouble, the scarred man said with a laugh. The others joined in, a sound like coyotes yipping. We are friendly folk, real friendly. In fact, we would be happy to help you with that lady. Looks like she could use some better company than a saddle tramp like you. The lady is fine where she is, Vincent said, his voice dropping lower, taking on an edge that made Eleanor shiver. And we will be moving on now. The scarred man's expression hardened. I do not think so. See, there is a toll for crossing this territory. The toll is whatever we say it is. This is open range. There is no toll. There is now. The man's hand moved toward his gun. What happened next occurred so fast that Eleanor barely processed it. Vincent's gun was in his hand before the other man's had cleared its holster. The barrel pointed directly at the scarred man's chest. Here is what is going to happen, Vincent said, his voice cold and steady. You and your friends are going to turn around and ride away. If anyone reaches for a weapon, I will put a bullet in you before you can blink. I am a fair hand with a gun, and at this distance, I will not miss. The scarred man's eyes widened slightly, reassessing the situation. He looked at his companions, then back at Vincent. Whatever he saw in Vincent's eyes made him think better of pushing the issue. Easy, friend, he said, raising his hand slowly. We were just having a bit of fun. No need for violence. Ride away. Now. The men turned their horses and cantered off, though not before the scarred man shot a venomous look back at them. Vincent kept his gun out until they were well out of range, then holstered it and looked at Eleanor. You all right? Eleanor realized she was shaking. Yes, thank you. I thought they were going to. They were thinking about it, Vincent said grimly. But they were also cowards like most bullies. Faced with real resistance, they backed down. Still, we need to be more careful. This area is more lawless than I thought. They rode hard for the rest of the afternoon, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the riders. When they finally made camp that evening, Eleanor could barely dismount, her whole body aching with exhaustion and leftover fear. Vincent built the fire while Eleanor sat on a rock, trying to stop her hands from trembling. He brought her coffee and sat down nearby, his expression concerned. I am sorry you had to experience that, he said. If I had known this area was so dangerous, I would have chosen a different route. It is not your fault, Eleanor said, and you protected me. I cannot thank you enough for that. You do not need to thank me. It is what any decent person would do. But you are not just any person, Eleanor said, meeting his eyes. You are a good man, Vincent Sawyer. I am very fortunate that you were in Hayes City when I needed help. Something shifted in Vincent's expression, a softening around his eyes. I am fortunate too, Eleanor Russell. Your courage reminds me why I left my father's ranch in the first place. It would have been easier for you to marry Thornton, to accept your fate and live a life of fear and misery. But you chose differently. That takes real strength. They sat together as the sun set, the firelight dancing between them, and Eleanor realized that the cowboy sitting across from her had become more than just her rescuer. He had become her friend, someone who understood her in a way no one else ever had. The third day of travel brought them within sight of Sheridan by mid-afternoon. The town was indeed larger than Hayes City, with a proper main street lined with two-story buildings, a train station, and the bustle of commerce and activity. Eleanor felt both relief and an unexpected sadness as they rode toward it. Vincent led them to a respectable-looking boarding house run by a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Patterson. He paid for a room for Eleanor for 3 nights, despite her protests. "You will need time to find work and get settled," he explained. "Consider it payment for your company on the trail. I had been dreading traveling alone." Mrs. Patterson showed Eleanor to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. After 3 days in the wilderness, the soft bed and wash basin of clean water seemed like unimaginable luxury. Eleanor cleaned herself up as best she could, washing away the dust and grime of the trail, and changed into her spare dress from her small bundle. When she came downstairs, she found Vincent waiting in the parlor, his hat in his hands. He had cleaned up as well, and without the trail dust, Eleanor could better appreciate his features: strong jaw, kind eyes, and an honest face that bore the marks of hard living but no cruelty. "I was hoping you would join me for supper at the restaurant down the street," Vincent said, a touch of nervousness in his voice. "If you are not too tired." "I would like that very much," Eleanor said. The restaurant was modest but served hearty food, and Eleanor realized she was ravenous. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the events of the past 3 days settling over them. It was only as they lingered over coffee that the reality of their situation truly hit Eleanor. This was goodbye. "When will you leave for Colorado?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Vincent turned his coffee cup in his hands, not meeting her eyes. "I was planning to head out tomorrow morning. The ranch I am aiming for will be hiring for the season, and I want to get there before all the positions are filled." Eleanor nodded, fighting the sudden tightness in her chest. "Of course, that makes sense." Vincent trailed off, then started again. "These past 3 days have been, I have enjoyed your company very much. You are a remarkable woman." "I have enjoyed your company too," Eleanor said softly. "More than I can say. I do not know what I would have done without you." They walked back to the boarding house slowly, neither seeming eager to end the evening. At the door, Vincent removed his hat and looked at Eleanor with an expression she could not quite read. "If you need anything at all, you can send a telegram to the Silver Creek Ranch in Colorado. That is where I will be. Promise me you will let me know if you are all right." "I promise," Eleanor said, though her throat felt tight. "And Vincent, thank you. Not just for the help, but for reminding me that there are good men in this world." Vincent reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. "You remind me that there are good women worth protecting, worth knowing." He dropped his hand and stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good night, Eleanor. I hope you find what you are looking for." He turned and walked away into the darkness, and Eleanor stood on the porch watching until he disappeared around a corner. Then she went upstairs to her room and, for the first time since leaving Hays City, allowed herself to cry. The next morning, Eleanor woke early and dressed quickly, intending to catch Vincent before he left town. But when she hurried to the livery stable, she found his horse already gone. The stable hand told her the cowboy had ridden out before dawn. Eleanor spent the rest of the day walking around Sheridan in a daze, making half-hearted inquiries about work, but unable to focus. She found a position at a dressmaker's shop, starting the next day, and the wages would be enough to pay for her room and food with a little left over. It was exactly what she needed, but the victory felt hollow. That night, lying in bed, Eleanor admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny. She had fallen in love with Vincent Sawyer. Somewhere between Hays City and Sheridan, between the campfires and the long hours of riding, between the shared stories and comfortable silences, her heart had betrayed her. And now he was gone, riding toward Colorado and a life that did not include her. She told herself it was foolish, that she had known him for only 3 days, that she should be grateful for her freedom and her fresh start. But the heart, Eleanor was discovering, did not listen to reason. The days turned into a week, and Eleanor threw herself into her work at the dress shop. Mrs. Cooper, the owner, was a kind woman who appreciated Eleanor's skill with a needle and her eye for detail. The other seamstresses were friendly enough, and Eleanor began to build the foundations of a new life. But every evening she found herself drawn to the train station, watching the westbound trains depart and wondering if she should buy a ticket to Colorado. She always talked herself out of it. Vincent had offered her help out of kindness and duty, nothing more. He had made no promises, expressed no desire for her to follow him. To show up at his ranch would be presumptuous and embarrassing. 2 weeks after arriving in Sheridan, Eleanor was working in the dress shop when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up from her stitching and nearly dropped her needle. Vincent Sawyer stood in the doorway, dusty from travel, his hat in his hands, looking uncertain and hopeful all at once. "Hello, Eleanor," he said. Eleanor set down her work with trembling hands and stood. "Vincent, what are you doing here?" He stepped further into the shop, glancing at Mrs. Cooper and the other seamstresses, who were watching with undisguised curiosity. "Could we talk outside?" Eleanor nodded, removed her work apron, and followed him out onto the wooden sidewalk. The afternoon sun was bright, making her squint after the dimness of the shop. "I got halfway to Colorado," Vincent said without preamble, "and I realized I was an idiot. I kept thinking about you, wondering if you were all right, if you had found work, if you were happy. And then I realized something." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "I did not want to just know if you were all right. I wanted to be there to make sure you were all right. I wanted to share your successes and help you through your troubles. I wanted to see you every morning and every evening. I wanted to know what your favorite foods are and what makes you laugh and what you dream about." Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "Vincent, I know we have only known each other for a short time," he continued, speaking faster now as if afraid he would lose his courage. "And I know I have nothing to offer you. I am a ranch hand with no property and no prospects beyond my next paycheck. But I also know that I have never met anyone like you, Eleanor Russell. Your courage, your kindness, your strength, they have changed something in me. I rode away thinking it was the noble thing to do to let you start fresh without complications. But I realized I was just being a coward." "You are not a coward," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "You are the bravest man I have ever met." "Then prove it by answering me honestly," Vincent said, stepping closer. "Is there any chance at all, that you might feel the same way about me that I feel about you?" Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears, happy tears. Yes, I feel the same way. I have felt it since the first night on the trail, maybe even before that. When you rode away, I thought my heart would break." Vincent's face lit up with a smile that transformed his entire appearance. He reached out and took her hands in his. "Then come with me to Colorado, or I will stay here in Sheridan. I do not care where we are as long as we are together. I love you, Eleanor. I know it is fast and probably crazy, but I love you." "I love you too," Eleanor said, and saying the words out loud made them feel even more real and right. "I will go anywhere with you, Vincent Sawyer." He pulled her into his arms then, right there on the main street of Sheridan, and kissed her. It was Eleanor's first real kiss, and it was everything she had ever imagined. Sweet and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. Mrs. Cooper was standing in the doorway of the dress shop, watching with a smile. "I take it you will be leaving my employment, Miss Russell." Eleanor blushed but nodded. "I am sorry for the short notice, Mrs. Cooper, but yes, I will be leaving." "Do not apologize, dear." A woman should always follow her heart, especially when it leads her to a man who looks at her the way that one looks at you. Mrs. Cooper winked. You can work through the end of the week to give me time to find a replacement. That should give you time to plan whatever comes next. Vincent and Eleanor spent the rest of the week in Sheridan, making plans for their future. They decided to travel to Colorado together, where Vincent would take up the ranch hand position and Eleanor would seek work in the nearest town. It was not a conventional arrangement, traveling together unwed, but Eleanor had already defied convention by refusing Marcus Thornton and fleeing Hays City. She was not about to let propriety stand between her and happiness. On their last evening in Sheridan, Vincent took Eleanor for a walk along the creek outside of town. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and rose, and the air was filled with the sound of birdsong. I want to do this properly, Vincent said, stopping and turning to face her. Then, to her surprise, he dropped to one knee and pulled a small ring from his pocket. It was simple, just a thin gold band, but Eleanor had never seen anything more beautiful. Eleanor Russell, I cannot offer you wealth or status or an easy life. But I can offer you my heart, my loyalty, and every bit of strength I have to make you happy. Will you marry me? Yes, Eleanor said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He stood and kissed her again, and Eleanor felt as if her heart might burst with joy. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Safe and exciting all at once, comfortable and passionate, like coming home and setting off on an adventure simultaneously. They were married 3 days later by a circuit judge passing through Sheridan. The ceremony was simple, held in the parlor of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house with Mrs. Cooper and Mrs. Patterson as witnesses. Eleanor wore her best dress, and Vincent bought a new shirt for the occasion. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor felt as if she had been given a second chance at life, a new beginning free from the shadows of her past. The journey to Colorado took them 10 days of steady travel. As a married couple, they could travel more openly, stopping at small towns along the way and staying in proper boarding houses. Vincent was attentive and gentle, always making sure Eleanor was comfortable and never pushing her beyond what she was ready for. Their wedding night had been awkward and sweet, both of them fumbling and nervous, but it had also been beautiful in its honesty and vulnerability. As they traveled, Eleanor learned more about the man she had married. Vincent had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He was well-read, having spent his lonely years on the trail reading whatever books he could find or borrow. He had a good singing voice and would sometimes hum old songs as they rode. He was patient with the horses and kind to the people they met, always willing to lend a hand or offer help without expecting anything in return. Eleanor also shared more of herself with him. She told him about her childhood dreams of becoming a teacher, how she loved to read and write, but had never had the opportunity for much formal education beyond what her mother had taught her. She confessed her fears about the future, her worries that Marcus Thornton might somehow find them, her uncertainty about fitting into a new place. Vincent listened to everything with quiet attention, offering reassurance without dismissing her concerns. If Thornton ever shows his face near you again, he will answer to me, he said one evening as they made camp. And as for fitting in, you fit in with me, and that is all that matters. The rest will work itself out. They arrived at Silver Creek Ranch in late May, when the Colorado mountains were still capped with snow but the valleys were blooming with wildflowers. The ranch was larger than Eleanor had imagined, sprawling across a broad valley with hundreds of cattle grazing on the rich grass. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure, and there were several outbuildings including a bunkhouse, barn, and cookhouse. The ranch owner, Thomas McKinney, was a gruff but fair man in his 50s. He hired Vincent on the spot after watching him work with the horses for 10 minutes. He also mentioned that his wife was looking for help in the main house, as their previous housekeeper had just moved back east. Eleanor met Margaret McKinney that same day and liked her immediately. Margaret was a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes and a quick smile. She hired Eleanor to help with cooking, cleaning, and mending, offering a generous wage along with a small cabin on the ranch property where Eleanor and Vincent could live. The cabin was tiny, just 2 rooms, but it was theirs. Eleanor cried when she first saw it, overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, she and Vincent finally had a home. They settled into life at Silver Creek Ranch quickly. Vincent proved himself to be one of the best hands on the ranch, skilled with cattle and horses alike. The other cowboys respected him, and even the surly foreman admitted that Vincent knew his business. Eleanor flourished under Margaret McKinney's guidance, learning not just household skills but also about ranching, the surrounding area, and the tight-knit community of ranchers and families in the valley. Summer passed in a blur of hard work and simple happiness. Eleanor and Vincent would rise before dawn, work through the long days, and return to their cabin in the evening exhausted but content. They would sit on their small porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains, talking about their day or sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. It was during one of these evenings in late August that Eleanor told Vincent her news. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had waited to be certain before saying anything. "Vincent, I am going to have a baby." Vincent's reaction was everything Eleanor could have hoped for. His face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally pure joy. He pulled her into his arms carefully as if she were made of glass. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "As certain as I can be. Margaret confirmed it this morning. She has had 5 children of her own, so she knows the signs." Vincent held her for a long time, and when he finally pulled back, Eleanor saw tears in his eyes. "I am going to be a father," he said, as if testing the words. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Eleanor asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy, Eleanor, I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I have words to express. You have given me everything: a home, a purpose, love, and now a family. I promise you I will be nothing like my father. Our child will grow up knowing they are loved and wanted and free to choose their own path." "I know you will be a wonderful father," Eleanor said, touching his face. "You are already a wonderful husband." The pregnancy brought changes to their life. Vincent became even more protective, constantly worrying about Eleanor overexerting herself. Margaret reduced Eleanor's workload and made sure she got plenty of rest and good food. The other ranch families welcomed the news with genuine warmth, and Eleanor found herself embraced by a community in a way she had never experienced in Hays City. As autumn turned to winter and Eleanor's belly grew round with their child, Vincent began making improvements to their cabin. He built a cradle from smooth pine wood, sanding it until there were no rough edges that could harm delicate baby skin. He chinked every gap in the walls to keep out the cold Colorado winter. He saved every extra penny from his wages to buy fabric for baby clothes, which Eleanor sewed in the evenings by lamplight. They talked endlessly about the future, making plans and dreaming dreams. Vincent spoke of someday saving enough to buy their own small piece of land, maybe running a few head of cattle of their own. Eleanor talked about teaching their children to read and write, passing on the love of learning that had sustained her through difficult times. One cold December evening, as snow fell softly outside their cabin, Vincent pulled Eleanor into his arms as they lay in bed. "Do you ever think about Hayes City?" he asked quietly. Eleanor considered the question. "Sometimes. I wonder if my mother is all right, though I doubt she has thought of me since I left. I wonder if Marcus Thornton ever married someone else, some other poor girl whose family needed money more than they cared about her welfare. Do you regret your choice, refusing him, leaving all of it?" "Not for a single moment," Eleanor said firmly. "That choice led me to you, to this life, to our child. How could I regret that? Yes, I wish I had not had to lose my family, but they were willing to sell me to a monster. You respected my right to choose, Vincent. You saw me as a person, not property. That is what love should be." Vincent kissed her forehead. "Refusing Thornton was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. It is what made me first notice you, first want to know you. Your courage changed both of our lives." Their son was born on a frigid January night in 1879. The labor was long and difficult, with Margaret McKinney and the ranch doctor in attendance. Vincent paced outside the cabin for hours, nearly wearing a hole in the frozen ground. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst through the door to find Eleanor exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," Eleanor said, her voice hoarse from effort. Vincent approached slowly, awe written on his face. He reached out tentatively, and Eleanor placed the baby in his arms. Vincent looked down at the tiny face, the small hands waving in the air, and Eleanor saw tears stream down his cheeks. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy and had finally agreed on one. "William," Eleanor said. "William Thomas Sawyer. William for hope and new beginnings, and Thomas after Mr. McKinney, who gave us our chance here." "William Thomas Sawyer," Vincent repeated, and the baby opened his eyes as if responding to his name. "Welcome to the world, son. You are already so loved." The first years of William's life were challenging but joyful. Parenthood tested both Eleanor and Vincent in ways they had not anticipated, from sleepless nights to childhood illnesses to the constant worry that they were doing everything wrong. But they faced it together, supporting each other through the difficulties and celebrating every small milestone. Vincent proved to be a devoted father. Despite his long days working the ranch, he always made time for William. He would carry the boy on his shoulders around the ranch, pointing out animals and teaching him the names of things. He sang to him, read to him from the few books they owned, and played with him with infinite patience. Eleanor blossomed as a mother. She had worried during her pregnancy that she would not know how to be a good mother, having had such a complicated relationship with her own. But her love for William was instinctive and fierce. She sewed his clothes, taught him his letters as soon as he was old enough, and filled their small cabin with love and laughter. Life at Silver Creek Ranch continued peacefully. Vincent worked his way up to foreman after 3 years, earning a substantial increase in pay and greater responsibility. Eleanor took on more duties, helping Margaret McKinney, who had come to treat her like a daughter. They saved diligently, putting away every spare dollar toward their dream of owning their own land. When William was 4 years old, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1883, arriving with remarkably little fuss on a beautiful April morning. They named her Sarah Margaret, Sarah for the woman whose tragic death had inadvertently saved Eleanor from a similar fate, and Margaret for their benefactor and friend. Sarah was a calm baby, content to observe the world with her large, serious eyes. William was enchanted with his little sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help care for her. Vincent was equally besotted, amazed that they had created this perfect little person. It was during Sarah's christening celebration that Eleanor received a letter that would bring their past back in an unexpected way. The mail had been delayed by spring flooding, and the letter was dated 2 months earlier. It was from Mrs. Chen in Hayes City, the boarding house owner who had turned Eleanor away on that desperate night 5 years ago. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the letter and read it aloud to Vincent. "Dear Mrs. Sawyer, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing with news from Hayes City that I thought you should know. 6 months ago, Marcus Thornton was arrested for the murder of his third wife. Unlike Sarah Connolly's death, this time there were witnesses who came forward, and the new sheriff was not in Thornton's pocket. He was tried, convicted, and hanged last month. The truth about Sarah and his other victims finally came out during the trial. Many people in town, including your father, have expressed regret for their treatment of you. Your mother especially has been distraught. She asked me to find you and tell you she is sorry, though she understands you may never forgive her. I am sorry I turned you away that night. I have regretted it ever since. You were right to refuse Thornton, and we were all cowards for not supporting you. I hope you have found happiness wherever you are. With regrets and best wishes, Lai Chen." Eleanor set down the letter with shaking hands. Vincent pulled her into his arms and she let the tears come, a complicated mixture of grief, anger, relief, and sorrow. "I should feel triumphant," Eleanor said when she could speak. "But I just feel sad. Sad for the women who did marry him and suffered. Sad for my parents who sold their daughter's happiness for money that probably did not even save them in the end. Sad for Mrs. Chen and all the people who were too afraid to do the right thing." "What do you want to do?" Vincent asked gently. Eleanor thought about it for a long time. Finally, she said, "I want to write back to Mrs. Chen. I want to thank her for telling me, and I want her to know that I do not blame her. Fear makes people do terrible things, and she has clearly lived with her guilt. As for my parents—" She paused, looking at Vincent, at William playing with blocks in the corner, at baby Sarah sleeping in her cradle. "I have a family now, Vincent. You and our children are my family. I do not need forgiveness from people who were willing to sacrifice me to save themselves. I am not angry anymore, but I am not ready to reconnect either. Maybe someday, but not now." "That is more than fair," Vincent said. "You get to decide who deserves a place in your life, Eleanor. After everything they put you through, you owe them nothing." Eleanor wrote her letter to Mrs. Chen that evening, thanking her for the information and wishing her well. She mentioned that she had married and had children, that she was happy and settled. She did not include a return address beyond Silver Creek Ranch, Colorado. If her parents truly wanted to find her, they could, but she would not make it easy. The years continued to pass peacefully. Vincent and Eleanor saved enough money to buy a small parcel of land adjacent to the McKinney Ranch, 160 acres with a creek running through it. Thomas McKinney sold it to them at a fair price, and even helped Vincent build a modest but sturdy house on the property. They moved in when William was 7 and Sarah was 3, finally achieving the dream they had talked about on those long-ago nights in their tiny cabin. Vincent continued to work for the McKinney Ranch while also building up their own herd of cattle. It was hard work, often exhausting, but it was theirs. Eleanor kept a large garden, raised chickens, and took in sewing work from neighboring ranches to bring in extra money. Together, they were building something lasting, a legacy for their children. More children followed. A son they named James in 1886, and twin daughters, Elizabeth and Catherine, in 1889. Their house, which had seemed spacious when they built it, now rang with the sounds of children laughing, arguing, and playing. Mealtimes were chaotic affairs, with everyone talking at once, but Eleanor and Vincent would not have had it any other way. Eleanor taught all their children to read and write, holding lessons at the kitchen table every morning before they started their chores. She instilled in them the value of education and the importance of thinking for themselves. Vincent taught them to ride, to work with cattle, to respect the land and animals in their care. Most importantly, both parents taught their children through example that love meant respect, that marriage should be a partnership of equals, and that courage sometimes meant standing alone for what was right. William grew into a thoughtful young man who loved books as much as ranching. Sarah was quiet but determined, with a gift for working with horses. James was the adventurer, always exploring and getting into scrapes. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and seeming to communicate without words. As the children grew, Eleanor and Vincent's love for each other only deepened. They had been through so much together: poverty, fear, hard work, loss, and joy. They had built a life from nothing but courage and determination. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, just as they had done in their little cabin years ago. "You remember the night I found you outside the livery stable?" Vincent asked one such evening. It was the summer of 1894, 16 years since that fateful meeting. "I remember everything about that night," Eleanor said, taking his hand. "I was so frightened and so angry and so lost, and then you appeared and offered me hope when I thought there was none left." "I was scared too," Vincent admitted. "I had no idea if I was doing the right thing, helping a stranger run away, but something told me I had to. And then I got to know you on that ride to Sheridan, and I realized I did not want to say goodbye." "Best decision you ever made, turning around and coming back," Eleanor said with a smile. "Second best," Vincent corrected. "The best was pulling my gun on that scarred man and his friends. The second best was coming back to Sheridan. The third best was everything after that." Eleanor laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have been blessed, haven't we? Despite everything we have been through, or maybe because of it, we have built something beautiful here." "We have," Vincent agreed. "And it all started because you had the courage to refuse Marcus Thornton. You chose freedom and dignity over safety and comfort. That choice saved your life, Eleanor. It also gave me mine." As the years rolled on, the Sawyer family became a respected part of the Colorado ranching community. Their children grew into fine young adults, each finding their own path. William went to college in Denver to study law, determined to help people who could not protect themselves. Sarah married a kind rancher from the next valley over and started her own horse breeding operation. James headed west to California, seeking adventure and opportunity. The twins, inseparable as ever, opened a successful dress shop in the nearest town, putting Eleanor's teaching to good use. Vincent and Eleanor became grandparents and then great-grandparents. They watched their family grow and flourish, knowing that each child and grandchild carried forward the legacy of courage and love that had defined their own story. In 1918, on a warm spring evening, Vincent and Eleanor sat on the porch of the house they had built 40 years earlier. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray and their bodies bearing the marks of a lifetime of hard work. But their love had not diminished with age. If anything, it had grown stronger, deepened by decades of shared experiences. "I got a letter from William today," Eleanor said. "He is arguing a case before the state Supreme Court, representing a woman who is trying to divorce her abusive husband. He said it reminded him of the stories we told him about why we left Kansas." Vincent smiled. "Our past still reaches into the present." I am proud of him for carrying on that fight. Every person he helps is another person who chooses freedom over fear. He wrote that he tells all his clients about his mother, who refused to marry a violent man even though it cost her everything. He says it gives them courage. Your courage has rippled outward, touching lives you will never meet, Vincent said. That is a legacy worth having. Eleanor looked out at the land they had built together, at the cattle grazing in the distance, at the house filled with memories of laughter and love. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not been in Hayes City that night? I try not to, Vincent said honestly. The thought of you facing that alone, or worse, being forced to marry Thornton, I cannot bear to think about it. But I was not alone, Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. You were there. And you did not just save me, Vincent. You saw me, really saw me, as a person with value beyond what I could provide for someone else. You respected my choices. You loved me for who I was, not who you wanted me to be. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Loving you has been the greatest gift of my life, Vincent said simply. Every day with you has been a blessing, even the hard days, especially the hard days because we faced them together. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Vincent and Eleanor sat together in the comfortable silence of two people who had built a lifetime of love on a foundation of courage and mutual respect. Their story had begun with a desperate flight in the darkness, with a young woman choosing dignity over safety and a cowboy offering help without expecting anything in return. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A love that had weathered every storm, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy of courage that would outlive them both. In the end, it all came back to that moment outside the livery stable when Vincent had said, "Refusing Thornton was the bravest thing anyone has done in this town in a long time." Those words had changed everything, offering Eleanor validation and hope when she had thought all was lost. They had been the beginning of a love story that proved bravery could be found in standing up for oneself, that true love meant supporting each other's right to choose, and that the greatest adventures often began with the simple act of extending kindness to a stranger. Years later, when Eleanor was in her 70s and her grandchildren asked her about her life, she would always start the story the same way. I was cast out for refusing to marry a violent man, and the cowboy who saved me said refusing him was the bravest thing I could have done. Everything good in my life came from that moment of courage. And then she would tell them the whole story, ensuring that the lesson lived on. That freedom and dignity are worth fighting for, that true love respects and empowers rather than controls, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself, even when the whole world tells you not to. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1924, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Vincent followed her just 6 months later, unable to imagine a world without the woman who had been his partner, his love, and his best friend for 46 years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a simple gravestone that read, "Eleanor and Vincent Sawyer." They chose courage, found love, and built a legacy. Their descendants still work the land they homesteaded, still tell the story of the woman who refused to marry a violent man and the cowboy who recognized her courage. The story has been passed down through 5 generations. A reminder that the choices we make in our darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, and that true love is built not on grand gestures but on daily acts of respect, support, and unwavering partnership. The ranch Eleanor and Vincent built still stands, larger now and modernized but still recognizably the place they carved out of the Colorado wilderness with determination and love. The house they built has been expanded, but the original rooms remain, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. Their great-great-grandchildren play in the same fields where William, Sarah, James, Elizabeth, and Catherine once played, continuing the legacy of a love story that began with a desperate flight in the darkness and ended with a family that spans generations. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings when the sunset paints the mountains gold, you can almost imagine two figures sitting on that old porch, hands clasped, watching the day fade into night. A woman who chose freedom over safety, and a man who recognized that choice as the bravest thing he had ever seen. Still together after all these years, their love as enduring as the mountains themselves.